Hello and welcome to the Leading Lounge. I'm your host, Dr. Justin DuBose. Here in the Leading Lounge, we talk with today's leaders and unpack lessons learned and being learned from a career of leading and communicating in their field. These conversations are designed to be both informal and informative, and we want to equip you with wisdom and tools to empower you as a leader where you are and where you want to be. Hey everybody, welcome to episode 32 of the Leading Lounge. Happy you could join us here for our next leadership tips, tricks, and tools episode. And just so you know, this will be our last of these episodes for this season. So our rhythm for the last 4 seasons of the podcast has been, I'll record some in the fall and we'll take usually a break over the holidays, and then we'll record some in the spring and we'll take a break over the summer. And so this season, we've alternated between these episodes with some tips, tricks, and tools following a great leadership book, and then interviews. So I'm going to tie into 2 episodes ago. So episode 30 had to do with your values. If you haven't watched that, you may want to watch that. It's really kind of a part 1 to this episode, but it's that our values are forged as a team, not forced on our team, right? So we as a leader forge our values together collectively, seeking input rather than just dumping them on our team and telling them this is what we value. And the reason this is a part 2 is in the book I'm following, which as with every episode, I'll have the Amazon link to this book in the show notes or in the video description. It's called The Leadership Challenge. It's this particular one is the 6th edition, and in the book they give you 5 leadership practices, and I use it for college courses I teach, some university courses I've designed for the Texas Rangers. Great book. It's very practical, and it's also really, really well researched. So it's quality stuff. So today we're talking about setting the example. So leading by example, and it's part 2 of the same practice, right? So the practice is to model the way for your people. This is what leadership looks like if you're a part of this organization. So in setting the example, I tell everybody when I do some trainings or coachings or teaching or anything, is that the best definition I've ever heard for leadership I saw at Fort Benning, Georgia, and it was this statue that's just called "Follow Me," right? And so it's like, what does leadership look like? Well, here's what leadership looks like. Follow me and you'll see what it looks like. So I give everyone this same kind of example definition of leadership. I think it's a good way to think about modeling the way, setting the example for your team, and let them see what leadership looks like. Easier said than done, that's for sure. But the one thing I like about this book, one of the many things, is it lays it out for you so that it's in bite-sized chunks, right? So you can do it. So this is now, if you're following along in the book, this chapter starts on page 71, and you flip the page on page 73, it lists 2 sides of the same coin of setting the example for your team. One side is you live the shared values, right? So the shared values that you forged together as a team, you live them out. That's kind of the head of the coin, and the tails is then you also teach others to model the values. So you live them out, and then you also teach others to do it, right? And again, easy to say, much more difficult to do. So I just want to give you a couple of practical tips, a couple of practical tools on how you can, where you are right now today in your leadership role, set the example for your team so they can see you live it out, and they can grasp on to what you're teaching them, what you're trying to share with them. And the thing I love about this chapter, and really all the chapters of this book, is the emphasis is on the execution, right? It's how do you live these things out? It's exceedingly practical. How do you live them out? Not just on the definition. You'll find a lot of books and a lot of people, a lot of things that will define things for you. This is what leadership means. This is, what this word means. This is what, setting the example means, but the emphasis here is on the execution. How do you actually live it out with your team in real life, instead of just, here's another way to define this term that may or may not be helpful for you. So I'm just going to pick one section from each of those 2 sides of the coin, and we'll talk about those briefly for this episode. So for live the shared values, that's the first part of setting the example, living the shared values. One of the things that the authors of this book go into, that if you'll do this, I'm telling you it'll help, and it'll be challenging for you, is They say you need to spend your time and attention wisely. Spend your time wisely. One of the traps that's very easy for us to fall into, no matter what industry we're in, no matter what field we're in, no matter what role we play within an organization, is that we have an incongruence in what we say and what we do, right? We say we're about this, we say we value this, but then if you actually look at our calendar or you inventory our time, you go, I don't think you're really all about that. You know, you say these words over here, but you're not doing them over here. So it's really hard to get that match of what I say to what I do. So one of the practical pieces of advice that come out of this book is really consider how you're spending your time. Look at your calendar. What are you actually doing? What is getting your time? What's receiving your attention? One of the struggles is the tyranny of the urgent, right? That things pop up and so we have to respond to them. And sometimes you just have to, right? Sometimes you just have to respond to things, but if we're not careful, we spend our whole week, our whole month, our whole year, our whole career, our whole lives responding to things that really aren't important. They might be more immediate, but they're really not more important. So when we're setting the example for our team and we're saying, this is what we're all about, then sit down, look at the calendar, invite those who you spend your time with to help hold you accountable to that, so that the things that I do match the things that I say. I was in an organization one time, and the motto was, it's all about the people, right? The people are the mission. We care more about people than we do about tasks, more about people than we do about things. And then you got behind the curtain and you found out, yeah, I don't think so. All in the interning and the shadowing and the training, it was all task oriented, right? This is what we do. We do tasks here. That's really what we value. So I'm the first to admit that it's challenging, it's difficult. But as far as setting the example and living out those values, actually live them out. Let it be reflected in your calendar. Let it be what your people on your team say about you, right? If we say we value people, then let's have our time reflect that. Let's have our calendar, our agendas reflect that we do spend time with people. And again, in reality, everyone has administrative tasks they have to do, right? Somebody's got to be minding the shop. I get it. But make sure that we're not saying one thing and doing a totally different thing, right? Our words are not here and our actions over here, that we have a match, right? And what we say we value versus what we do. Let your people see you live out the values that you guys cultivated together. It'll go a really long way in developing that trust and showing them what leadership looks like, and begin to have leaders develop almost naturally and organically just through seeing it lived out. Just through seeing it lived out. Don't underestimate the value, the value and the power of doing that, even though it is challenging. So look at your calendar, invite other people, sort of at the top table, if you want to call it that, or other people in your life to help hold you accountable, because it is a challenge. And on the second side of the coin, which is to teach others to model those values, I think there's an underrated truth that is in chapter 4 here. And in fact, I'm going to go ahead and turn there and tell you what page it's on, so you can read this section yourself. But when you're trying to teach other people, one of the struggles that people have is, well, I'm not a good teacher. I'm not comfortable teaching. You don't actually have to be like a qualified, certified teacher to be a great teacher. I'm sure you know this. But on page 88, the authors talk about the value of telling stories. Develop the art of storytelling. Anyone can do this. And you may not immediately see the connection between sharing a good, powerful story and teaching others to live out and model the values that you're saying and they see you doing. But the art of storytelling shouldn't be overlooked. I developed a communication training called Jumpstart Your Communication. I've done it with several organizations, do it as a coaching service as well, some communication coaching. My dissertation was on leadership communication, but basically there's a particular type of language that leaders use that help their people make sense of their environment, right? It's like the way that we help them understand things. One big, powerful tool in that toolbox is sharing stories. Just share stories, tell some stories, become a storyteller of your organization and your values. Find ways to share stories that highlight those truths so that people both see it lived out and they get it. Just every day in the workplace, they get it. You don't have to, pause everyone's progress, bring them all in the room and have this amazing, professional expert block of teaching, right? I mean, that's one way to do it. But you can just share stories. And I would say share corporate stories as well as personal stories, If for example, one of your values is that you value creativity, for example. Well, find a corporate story of some person within your organization who exercised just incredible creativity, right? It could be the founder of the organization. It could be someone who's no longer there. Could be someone who's there. But find a corporate story so they can see, oh, when we say creativity, here's an example of what that looks like. Share some corporate stories, but also share some personal stories. Don't shy away from the personal stories. Those are incredibly powerful and part of building that connection with people so that they know, back to the previous episode, episode 30, these are our values we built together, right? A personal story of when you had to find a creative solution to this problem, or you had to be, had to think outside the box for this person to help them, see what was going on in this situation. Some sort of creative story if your value is creativity. So share those stories, tell those stories, develop those stories, right? Craft those things. And again, use the people close to you to help you. Go, all right, so I'm trying to figure out how to tell this story, share this story in a way, that's helpful, that helps these people see this value in action, give some color and texture to it. But develop your craft of storytelling. A good story goes a long way. I've given many, many, many public speeches, and I could be giving people the very best, deepest bedrock truth and principles, and their eyes are totally glazed over, right? I could be connecting dots and saying just unbelievably smart things. Not that I do that very often. But when I go into storytelling mode, oh my goodness, man. I mean, you just see people from their eyes glazed over. They're about to fall asleep, and all of a sudden, I mean, they are locked in. They're in the zone, right? So work on the art of storytelling. And it's a great leadership skill. Very undervalued, underutilized leadership skill. So I'll leave you with this for these leadership tips, tricks, and tools for season 4 is we're going to leave off with going through this first principle or first practice, which is to model the way and setting the example, live the values yourself, and look at your time, inventory your time, see if you're doing it well. Let others speak into that. And also share some stories as a way of teaching others to live those values as well, right? Share some corporate stories, share some personal stories, and also share some positive and some negative stories too. Here's a good example of how this worked. Here's a really bad example. This one didn't go well at all. Those are just as helpful as the positive ones. So if you work on those, I promise you that setting the example, people will begin to see it, right? People will begin to see it. And you don't have to go from 0 to 100. You don't have to all of a sudden rearrange your whole calendar and your whole life. And now, I'm going to spend all my time with people. No, just let people see and experience the intentionality of going, hey, listen, we said we valued people, but I realized when I looked at my calendar and how I was spending my time, I wasn't doing a good job of that. Let me ask you to forgive me for that, and I'm going to try to do better, and please help me in this. I want to live out these values. That humility and communication goes a long way with people. So I hope that was helpful. I will put the link to the book here, The Leadership Challenge, in the description if you're on YouTube, in the show notes if you're listening somewhere on the podcast. I'll also mention the communication training that I have, Jumpstart Your Communication. Great. Storytelling is a big part of that. If I can help you with that, just reach out, shoot me an email. I have my email address there, or our website, communicatecare.com. And again, like I mentioned in my previous video, episode 30, I've also developed a specific training and coaching around your core values, right? Drive from your core values. So if you need help figuring out how to translate your core value, whatever it is or whatever they are, from theory to practice or from definition to execution, shoot me an email, hit me up at the website. I'm more than happy to help. I'm telling you that making that leap will go a long, long way for you in your own leadership and developing leaders within your team. But hope that's helpful. Next episode coming out will be an interview. It'll be our final episode of season 4. And then we'll take a little summer break and pick it up July 20th with episode 5. But if I can help you with anything between now and then, please don't hesitate to shoot me an email, reach out to me somehow through the podcast, through the YouTube channel, whatever. Happy to help. But you're doing the leadership work you're doing is great. I know it's difficult and challenging. So I pray this is helpful. God bless you with what you do, and we'll see you next time.